In chapter 252 of Black Clover, we get to peek into Lolopechka's thoughts. The Queen of the Heart Kingdom remembers a time where she used her vast knowledge from the previous Heart Queens to get a look into the distant past. During these moments, we get to understand that the calamity of the Qliphoth had previously occurred many millennia ago, where the devils came into this world and started wreaking havoc. She says over 90% of the people of this continent will die and the world will be destroyed. This is further corroborated by Noct, who mentions that if Lucifero is able to get into this world, it would spell the end of humanity as a whole. So, the main key takeaway from this portion is that the devils once roamed the world. Clearly, in the present day, there hasn't been any evidence of an extremely overt devil presence, but there have been a few that probably stuck around. For example, Magicula, and we can assume that a particular devil called Zagrid stuck around too. But what happened to the rest? How did they suddenly just end up back in the underworld? Were they defeated? Well, if that's the case, why did they not get killed off? Hey everyone, my name is Buzzard, and this is History Will Repeat Itself Again, a Black Clover theory video. Let's go. Make sure to like the video and subscribe to the channel for more Black Clover content, and I also do weekly reaction streams to the latest Black Clover chapters, so make sure you don't miss out on those. Alright guys. The answer to the question I asked earlier lies in the Elf arc. In the Elf arc, in chapter 182, Bavald the Elf, who had taken over the body of a Golden Dawn member, David, the guy who has dice magic, reveals to us that the Shadow Palace is a magic space that acts as the border between this world and the next. While this was relevant to the arc for revealing how Zagrid got his body back, the next line of dialogue is a big piece of evidence for the particular theory that I'm going to be giving to you guys. The elves of antiquity entrusted the Shadow Palace to the humans as a result of an ancient pact. I believe that this is actually Tabata foreshadowing the very same thing that Lolopechka saw in her thoughts. Furthermore, the Apostles of Sapphira and the stones that act as the key to the Shadow Palace were given to the elves as evidenced by Licht during his wedding, where he wears them. Now this could just be cool jewelry or some customary practice, but I believe that it is much deeper than that, and again is another piece of foreshadowing that we are yet to realize. I believe that this is Tabata further pointing out how symbolically the magic stones represent the union of the races of humans and elves. Licht wears it as a sign of respect to the pact that their races made, and to celebrate the union of their races once more, but now under happier circumstances as opposed to when the previous union was made to save the world from the devils. But these stones, being the vehicle of despair, just furthers the tragedy of the Elven massacre and proves to us that Zagrid was literally just toying with both of these races just to get a sense of pleasure, because as we now know, the world of the devils, that is the underworld, is a dark and dreary place where nothing exists and nothing is really relatively fun. So they come to the human world in order to have a lot of fun and entertain themselves by the despair of humans themselves. But essentially though, through all of these small pieces and clues of foreshadowing, what is Tabata trying to say? Before we get to talking about what exactly the theory is, let's establish a couple of things. 1. When the Elven massacre happened, I will refer to it as the past, and when I'm talking about the first initial Qliphoth incident, I will be referring to it as the ancient past, because Bavald referred to the pact as an ancient pact, so I think this just makes a lot of sense and will help us understand these events of timeline in a better, more cohesive manner. In the ancient past, the elves and humans both had locked away a portal to the place that can get you whatever you want from the underworld if you had the key, and they ensured that neither race ever had access to the space by implementing various countermeasures like entrusting the actual place to one race and the keys to that actual place to another, and this obviously places a lot of problems on the devils themselves trying to get to the overworld from the underworld. So it is clear to us that at least on this continent, all the races had experienced the terror of the devils, and it has affected them so much that they were willing to go to great lengths in order to make sure that such a calamity would never befall them again. But of course, they're gonna fail, and that is exactly what this theory is gonna talk about. So let's take a step away from this overarching narrative that is going to engulf the entire world and talk about one that is already complete. The story of Zagrid. While we do not know anything about Zagrid prior to the Elf Massacre, his experience in the past, which is during the Elf Massacre, is an extremely important point that we need to take note of. In the past, Zagrid had his way with the humans and elves alike and wreaked enough havoc that an entire race was essentially almost wiped out. But through the struggle, an elf, Licht, and humans, Lumiere and Secre, were essential in making sure that his plan of getting a body and a 5-leaf clover grimoire were both thwarted. Secre was able to seal him up with major repercussions, of course, and Zagrid did not get a body because Licht did not let him take over his body and became the demon that we see wreaking havoc on the world. Because both the races came together and contributed, they were able to get to the point where the devil's plans failed and he was sealed for, unfortunately, only a finite period of time. Now, if you paid attention earlier, you might have guessed exactly where I'm going with this. In the ancient past, we know that the humans and elves worked together to seal the devils and close the portal to the space between the two worlds. Similarly, in the past, 500 years ago, when Licht and Tetia and Lumiere were all alive, humans and elves, like I just said, came together and essentially sealed a devil while ruining his plans. Very, very, very similar to exactly what I just mentioned about the ancient past. So that is very clearly a parallel that Tabata seems to be working towards. So once we get an idea of what happened in the ancient past, we will be able to further prove that this is exactly what Tabata has been working for. So let's talk about what the theory actually is. If the theory that the initial sealing of the devils and the initial sealing of Zagrid is a parallel, why can't the death of Zagrid be treated the same way? What if the entire Elf Saga was in itself just foreshadowing for the entire main story of Black Clover? We know that the Qliphoth was sealed way back in the day. We know that people are working towards making sure that the Qliphoth appears in the world again. And similarly, Zagrid was able to make his appearance in the story once more. In the final battle, Zagrid had broken out of his seal and had accomplished what he set out to do in the past. He now had a 5-leaf clover grimoire, and he also had his body back. But at the end of it, what happened? All the races were able to come together and were finally able to kill Zagrid. They had a lot of trouble, but at the end of it, they were still able to kill Zagrid. That is important. In the battle to defeat Zagrid, we also had Charmy, a half-dwarf, all the elves and all the humans working together. And even though, like I said before, Zagrid had his body, he had a 5-leaf clover grimoire, he had accomplished what he wanted to do, and the situation is clearly much worse than it was in the past because of one small thing, right? This one small thing being the existence of anti-magic. They were actually able to kill Zagrid. In the future, regardless of the activation of the Tree of Qliphoth in the current arc or not, I do believe that the devils will come out into this world. And when that happens, just like in the battle where Zagrid was killed, the situation with the Qliphoth will be much, much worse in present day compared to how it probably was in the ancient past. But just like the battle with Zagrid, the existence of anti-magic itself kinda guarantees from a narrative standpoint the fact that they will probably win this one. But at the same time, a lot of arguments can be made to Asta's strength. While he definitely is one of the strongest people in the entire show, there are other people who are much, much stronger than him. For example, Dante and the entire Triad who are on his level will probably be way too much for Asta alone to take care of, even with anti-magic. But if you've been keeping up with Black Clover, the latest chapter revealed something called a Devil Union, and from the looks of it, in the latest chapter, Asta and Liba seemed to have unlocked the Devil Union, and as we know, a Devil Union is able to 100% use the power of the devil, and thereby we understand that the anti-magic that was barely present against the Zagrid fight, where both Noct and Liba referred to it as trickling down of anti-magic into Asta's sword, will now have been completely formed, and anti-magic exists fully, thus giving us the confidence to say that he will definitely be able to defeat the devils just like he did with Zagrid, and this time they will not just defeat and seal the devils into the underworld, but they will actually kill the devils, resulting in a proper parallel to the end of Zagrid, thereby completing the narrative circle. I think that Noct is a character that understands this really well, which is probably why he wants Asta at the forefront of their attack. So, what do you guys think about this theory? Do you think that the whole Zagrid storyline is in fact foreshadowing for the overarching narrative of Black Clover, or do you disagree? Do you think that these small clues lead to this conclusion, or is there something else that you can conclude using these clues? Let me know in the comments down below, and make sure to like the video and subscribe to the channel for a lot more Black Clover content and other anime and manga as well. Alright guys, with that said, my name is Buzzard and I will see you in the next video. Goodbye.